Cardi B had the biggest blow up in hip hop history. She still feels, not just sounds, feels hungry, disrespected, underrated, and neglected. This was one of the wackiest weeks of football that I've ever seen. Tony Hawk himself will tell you that that video game made a lot more people interested in skating culture. Welcome back to another episode of Behold Pop Culture, the show where we take a look at all the biggest moments over the past week that took place across major cultures and bring it to you so that you're well equipped for any conversation that you have this coming week. Today, the biggest moment over the past week took place in the form of Cardi B's Sophomore album being released, Am I the Drama? Cardi B had the biggest blow up in hip hop history. She was a reality TV personality and adult dancer who only started making music in 2015. Not even 2 full years later, she was the hottest new rapper in the entire world. As an otherwise unknown artist, she released the song Bodak Yellow and became only the second female rapper since Lauryn Hill to go #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 charts as a solo song. No features, just an artist at work. She stayed at the top of the charts for 3 straight weeks, and I couldn't go a day walking through New York without hearing someone blasting Bodak Yellow out of their car. Do you remember where you were as Cardi B began her reign taking over the music world? Her arrival was loud and unforgettable. In a year where the pop culture world got the album Damn by Kendrick Lamar, Reputation by Taylor Swift, and Divide by Ed Sheeran featuring the song Shape of You, Cardi B still found a way to make her presence felt through all of that noise. With that massive window of opportunity, she chose to keep her foot on the gas and give it her all to maximize the situation, dropping her debut album less than a year after releasing Bodak Yellow. And this album, Invasion of Privacy, was one of the biggest albums of 2018. Going #1 when it released, she continued setting records for accomplishments by a female rapper as only the 5th female rapper to go #1 with their album. The reason it hit so hard wasn't because she was the best rapper in the world or had the best beats that money could buy. It was because of how unapologetically confident she sounded on every song. She didn't care if people looked down on her because of the way she hustled. She sounded like someone outworking her peers at every turn. And with Nicki Minaj having not released an album in several years, the lane was wide open for another female rapper to step up. Bodak Yellow went on to become a prophecy because she really didn't have to dance anymore because she was making money moves. I thought that might have been the end of the fairy tale Cinderella run for Cardi B's music career, at least center stage in the limelight. But no, I watched her spin that success into dominating the Latin charts with the song I Like It, another #1 song. And she then parlayed that success into winning the Grammy for Best Rap Album for that year. Somewhat controversially, beating out Travis Scott's Astroworld. In case you missed it, she went in the span of 3 years from not being an artist to having #1 songs, #1 album, and a Grammy. That's how quickly your life can change. And it also gave birth to a whole new market in the music world for female rappers. The lane that at one point seemed like it was only available to Nicki Minaj opened up for us to receive the likes of a Megan Thee Stallion, Glorilla, Lotto, and many, many more. Fast forward to today, and now Cardi B is a household name. She became part of a power couple in the celebrity world alongside Migos rapper Offset. She continued to give us at least one hit single every single year and leaned into becoming a fashion icon with several memorable fashion looks. The only problem is one thing was missing. For 7 years, fans begged and highly anticipated her next album. She would give these singles, but where's the project? Where's the collection of songs that let us know where you're at in life? Even as a celebrity, the anticipation stayed strong, especially because there's a stigma that it's always difficult for your second album to be good because your first one gets to pull from all your life experience. The second one, you can't repeat the exact same thing about being an underdog, this being your first real chance of success, etc. The second one has to be more typically of a reflection of how your first album was received and where you're at now. Sometimes there's less material for you to pull from to make great art. Luckily for Cardi, with all the money and fame that she came into after her initial success, she retained an image as the most relatable artist in all of music. She publicly seems to have not changed one bit. She's on Instagram Lives with her kids showing her everyday struggles. She continues to share all of her thoughts seemingly without fear of potential embarrassment or being perceived as wrong. What other artist do you know that does that? In these 7 years, I have not seen one piece of content that looks like the success changed who she is. Motherhood may have, marriage may have, but she's kept that connection with her fans because many people can still see themselves in her. So here we are today, sophomore album, Am I the Drama? An opportunity for Cardi to double down on her place in music history. Can lightning strike twice for her? I sat down, put my headphones on, and for 23 songs, she reminded me exactly why she's one of the most unique artists in music and why so many people love to hear her rap and sing for that matter. On the songs Pick It Up and Bodega Baddie, she tapped into the pop Latin sound with Selena Gomez and a Latin trap sound with one of her best flows. On Man of Your Word, she aired out all the mistakes that both her and Offset made en route to their eventual divorce. And on the songs Dead and Pretty and Petty, she addressed all her rivals that dissed her over these years. She still feels, not just sounds, feels hungry, disrespected, underrated, and neglected. Emotions that people love turning into motivation. That's why she has showed zero discomfort doing all of these interviews and promotions for this album, including celebrating how important of a place it will hold in her life. So what did you think about the album? I'm ready to pop an important question for the music world. Is she in the proverbial Hall of Fame for music artists? She's had a relatively short but extremely impactful music career so far. If Lauryn Hill was able to cement herself in many people's minds in their personal Hall of Fame for music with her short stint, even if Cardi B was to never release music again, maybe she deserves to be in there too. With that in mind, we can now move on to the sports section where, similar to that, there are a lot more questions than answers that we got from this week in the NFL world. This was one of the wackiest weeks of football that I've ever seen. We had completely unexpected upsets, brutal mistakes from teams that ended up costing them games, and already 3 weeks in, there's multiple significant injuries that are changing the landscape of the game. In the NFL, a blocked field goal is something that maybe happens a handful of times in a given year. But this week alone, we had a handful of blocked kicks. The Philadelphia Eagles were locked in a tight battle with the Los Angeles Rams. Everyone wants to take down the defending champs the first chance that they get to show that they are just as good as those champions. The Rams had the lead early, but then Philly put the weight of the world on their quarterback Jalen Hurts back as he went on to lead their team back into the game and back to take the lead. They had a 1-point lead, and the Rams just needed to get into field goal range to potentially get 3 points from a kick to go home a winner. Their quarterback, Matthew Stafford, drove his team down the field, and with a few seconds left, gave his team the opportunity to kick it and win the game. The kicker was lining it up, made sure he felt confident, got his leg back, and as he proceeded to try to make that kick, 300-pound defensive player Jordan Davis jumped as high as he could, tipped the ball back, ran, picked the ball up, and took it all the way to the other side of the field for a touchdown. No more time on the clock, and the Philadelphia Eagles won the game. The quarterback for the Rams put his hands on his hips and looked down in disappointment as Los Angeles would go home with a loss on their record, while Philadelphia is now 3-0 and still showing that they're here to win another championship. There was also multiple dominant wins this week. Minnesota and Cincinnati both lost their starting quarterbacks last week. So we watched a battle of the backups that otherwise would have been expected to be an ugly, close game turn into a rout because the Minnesota Vikings clearly had more talent around their situation and potentially a better backup quarterback to win this game, going on to dominate the Cincinnati Bengals 48-10. A defensive player for the Vikings had one of the greatest games of all time as he got an interception and took it back for a touchdown, saw a fumble, picked it up and returned that for a touchdown, 2 defensive touchdowns from his hand, and also forced a fumble on one of the top 2 wide receivers in the game, Jamar Chase. Another team that dominated was the Seattle Seahawks as they took on the New Orleans Saints. Seattle opened that game scoring a touchdown, returning a punt for a touchdown, and then blocking a punt to then turn that short field into another touchdown. And from that point onward, the game was over. New Orleans had no chance and is clearly showing that in the NFL, 9 times out of 10, your quarterback being not the best in the league or in that conversation makes it extremely difficult to win football games. Lastly, for the NFL, like I mentioned, multiple upsets took place. An injured, struggling Carolina Panthers team shut out the Atlanta Falcons, winning 30-0. And the Super Bowl contending Green Bay Packers, who have come 2 consecutive weeks to mention that they look the best that they've looked in a while, suffered the surprise of the week, losing to the Cleveland Browns, a team that's expected to have one of the top picks in the draft. And realistically, most people were predicting them to barely win 4 or 5 games at best. But their defense is so dominant, it outweighs their offensive struggles, and that showed as they virtually shut out the Green Bay Packers for a large portion of the game and got just enough from their offense to squeak out a win 13-10. As of right now, there's only 4 teams that I'm confident are Super Bowl contenders. The Philadelphia Eagles, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Buffalo Bills, and the Los Angeles Rams. Every other team is showing cracks or concerns that makes it look like maybe they weren't as good as we thought. The Green Bay Packers are right on the line of convincing me that they're Super Bowl contenders, but we'll continue to monitor as these weeks go on and the real gets separated from the fake. While the NFL was giving us chaos on Sunday, the WNBA Playoffs moved on as we are now in the semifinals for the WNBA. There are 4 teams left: the Indiana Fever, the Minnesota Lynx, the Las Vegas Aces, and the Phoenix Mercury. The Phoenix Mercury took down the defending champions in the New York Liberty in an action-packed series, while the Aces and the Lynx, who are no stranger to playoff success, were able to win their series. The question of this round, though, is do the Indiana Fever, who are missing one of the biggest stars in all of sports in Caitlin Clark, have enough to take down the Las Vegas Aces, who are led by 4-time MVP Aja Wilson, with it being announced this weekend that she won again back-to-back this year and last year MVP, cementing, if there was any question at all, that she's one of the greatest women's basketball players of all time. While on the other side of the bracket, the Phoenix Mercury, who are hot, beating the defending champions, will they be able to continue their streak to take down the Minnesota Lynx? The playoffs is where the pressure is on and excitement reaches its maximum velocity. But there's not only excitement in the sports world, because in the music world, outside of Cardi B doing her thing, everyone, and I do mean every artist, has to be aware as Taylor Swift's album is just a mere weeks away from being released. The Life of a Showgirl has promotions in full swing, where one of the most extensive and involved campaigns and promotions to push an album that you'll ever find. It began with her appearance on New Heights, the podcast with Travis and Jason Kelce, but she's rolled out her exclusive physical copies to pre-order for the album, live events, creative partnerships, brands who are going to follow along even without having a relationship with Taylor. If you're hearing this now, good luck getting a physical copy because most of them are probably sold out by now. Various CDs and vinyls with exclusive poems, artwork, anything that you could imagine a fan of Taylor Swift could want, she's finding a way to give it to them. She's even planned a hybrid cinematic release event with a movie that's going to be released in theaters. And with her interviews being few and far in between, she has a massive one lined up with BBC's Graham Norton, likely accompanied by a performance. The theme of this album is a lot of orange, so don't be surprised if brands follow along, including orange in their promotions. This album is coming October 3rd, and she's even going to have a radio station playing all of her songs and deep cuts to get fans hyped for this release. Are you going to be listening? I will certainly be tuned in into what will likely be one of the biggest pop cultural albums of the decade. An album looking back on what it was like being on the biggest tour in music history. I will definitely be tuned in to hear her reflections on what she's experienced. Get ready for this album to break all sorts of records for the music world. Cardi B wasn't the only one this week with a highly anticipated new release. For her, it was her sophomore album, and for the new video game Skate 4, it was the follow-up edition to the wildly cultural successful Skate 3. Skate 3 is a game that's considered one of the best sports video games of all time. It comes down from a long line of descendants from the ever iconic Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. That game came out in 1999 and is considered a significant reason why skating as a culture breached into the pop world. Tony Hawk's video game exposed skating culture to millions of people. Not only from you being able to do all of these tricks that the world deemed cool at that time, but it also pushed punk music as that was inseparable from the world of skating culture. The soundtrack for that game to this day is considered one of the best ever done, and you can trace that push and punk music that came from that game all the way to today, where now the Superman reboot is a Superman that's a punk rocker. Tony Hawk himself will tell you that that video game made a lot more people interested in skating culture, and that he cared a lot about making sure that the music and feel of the game matched what he actually experienced in skate parks. So while that was a moment in gaming history, we fast forward a little under 10 years later and we get the Skate series coming on the scene. Where they separated themselves from Tony Hawk's game is using the analog stick to be able to do cool tricks. Before it was pressing buttons, but now with the analog stick, it feels like you're doing a kickflip. It feels like you're grinding on the rails. You could feel the actual actions coming through the controller as you play. And fans loved it. Skate 1 and Skate 2 did decent, but Skate 3 was the one that became a cultural mainstay, as people could do all these impossible tricks, but it was grounded in a sense of realism that Tony Hawk's game didn't have. People, for years afterwards, are still playing that game when they want a skating game, similar to how people who wanted to play college football had the 2014 game and were playing it for years until EA found a way to reboot it with the new NCAA football games. I even experienced the culture of people, especially on YouTube and TikTok, that would go on this game and do impossible tricks, get millions of views, and a bunch of people in the comments would talk about how they're trying to recreate the same trick but can't do it. There was a culture behind who could do the coolest tricks, who was the best skateboarder in the game. And that community was passionate and waiting for Skate to get the next edition, the upgraded version with new graphics. There's just something so satisfying about landing a kickflip, whether it's in Skate, Pro Skater, a tech deck, True Skate on the iPad. So this week, Skate 4 came out in early access for free for people to test. And unfortunately, it's been pretty mixed reviews so far. The version they released feels probably too early, as you can still do cool tricks and skate around, and there's mini missions-esque things or tasks that you can do, but that's about it. You do these tasks and you can unlock some new clothes. This is not to say that Skate 4 and its final version won't be much better, but fans are feeling a little shaky on it, as the most fun that people are having is the glitches. Doing a trick, rolling around, and you end up going 100 million feet in the air and can do tricks. It's unfortunate that something that was supposed to be such a massive pop cultural moment with all the hype leading up to it fell a little bit flat for the start. Now I'll continue to monitor and see if they get it fixed, get it into a much more finalized version that people can enjoy a lot more, because people are still playing it, even in this beta version. But we want you to revolutionize what the last game did with you having so many years to iterate on it. People who play video games are relatively patient. As you'll see, GTA, people have been waiting over 10 years for that. And watch as when GTA 6 releases, it will likely break every single record that video games have held, because GTA 5 has several records of its own. So while Skate fans continue to hope that more is yet to come for a potentially iconic game, we've come to the end of this week's podcast. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you taking the time out to get caught up on all these major moments that are taking place across culture. And I'll talk to you next week as we inch closer to the Taylor Swift album, and Doja Cat's album is coming out next week, so we'll see if she can make some noise before Taylor shuts down the music world. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you next time. This is Behold Pop Culture.